A quarter of a century, 25 years. That's how long compulsive gambling, gambling addiction has been an enormous part of my life. In this video, I'm going to tell the story of how it started and how it really eroded into my life very, very quickly. I've never told some of these things certainly publicly in the past. So it's going to be a bit of a longer one. Guys, it's Matt. I'm a compulsive gambler in recovery and I'm your mind and movement mentor, here to help you. So when I first started this channel about a year ago, I did a video with my gambling story. And I said that my first ever memory of gambling was when we went on a family holiday to Newquay, and I'd saved up some money and just became completely mesmerized by this Simpsons fruit machine that was in the hotel foyer of where we were staying. And that story is totally true, and it is a memory that I have kind of in my mind's eye, that I can often see myself playing that machine, albeit I was, I want to say maybe 11 or something like that. Definitely too young to be playing machines, fruit machines, but I'd seen my dad playing them at motorway service stations from time to time. He wasn't a gambler, but I would maybe hold the buttons and I would kind of actively participate a little bit in it, and it was all quite fun, and the bright lights were shining and that kind of thing. And that, I don't think, is quite my first memory of gambling. I actually feel like there is a phase before that when I would go and play football in the park with my dad, and I would take penalties against him, and he could save every single penalty that I wanted to take if he wanted to, or he could let them go in. I was at that kind of age where I wasn't going to score, essentially, unless he let me. And I remember, I can't remember whose idea it was, if it was his or mine, that I said, you know, if I score a penalty, can I have 50p? Which at that time was a hell of a lot of money. And gosh knows what I would have bought with it. And I think in pure jest, he'd said something to me like, okay, but if you don't score, then you have to give me 50p, or might have been a pound, very low denomination amount of money, but regardless. And I remember constantly taking these penalties against him, and almost like, I got to the point where I owed him maybe £2.50, £3, £3.50. I'm taking these penalties 6, 7, 8, 9 goes. I can't score. He's saving them with his feet. And I remember just doubling down in my mind as to like, okay, well, I can definitely do the next one. And feeling like the anticipation building within me for wanting to take the next penalty, it meaning a bit more. You know, I guess what I understand now is maybe dopamine or brain chemicals or endorphins or something like that, like kind of really making it important. And I remember we got bored and we walked back from the park that we used to play football in, and I think I owed him £15.50 or something like that, which in hindsight now, he was never ever going to take from me. But I remember just going into the downstairs bathroom at our old family home and just thinking, how on earth am I going to pay this back? I'm not going to be able to pay this. That is so much money. And that is probably a memory that predates us being on holiday in Newquay and me discovering the fruit machines. And so I remember, I told this story previously, but I remember when we were away on holiday, I'd saved up some money and I had some cash, a little bit of cash, probably 40, 50 pound. It was so much money back then to me, so much money. I was probably 11 or 12. And I remember just creating times that I could go down to play this fruit machine, like saying, oh, I just want to go and see if anyone's on the ping pong table, or I'm just going to go and kick a ball about outside for a bit, and consciously engineering windows that I could get away from my parents so I could go down and watch this machine if someone else was on it, or I could have a go. And I remember kind of just shoveling it was only 5p a play, but shoveling kind of pound coins into this and just being mesmerized by the bright lights, and over time just watching the money absolutely dwindle away to the point where I'd lost money that I just knew I couldn't get back. I think the jackpot was £5, and even if I was to win that, I was in over my head at this point. And I always remember this story that we were walking down the pier in Newquay, and I saw this like surf shop and went in, and I had this nice No Fear t-shirt that I wanted to buy. Had some cool slogan on it or something, and my mum said, well, you know, you saved up some money to come here. If you like it, buy it. You've got your money. And I remember having to kind of method act and kind of being in character and say, no, I don't really like it. There'll be another one down the street, because I just knew that I didn't have the money left. I didn't, like, it was probably 20 quid and I'd have maybe £8 or £9 left, down from this 50 that I'd started, because it had all gone in this 5p to play Simpsons fruit machine. And she said, you know, I think you should get it. You know, you don't want to just save up to come on holiday for the sake of saving up to come on holiday, and, you know, not really have anything to show for it. She said, you still have got your money, haven't you? And I remember I said, oh yeah, you know, I'm sort of getting sketchy at this point and probably giving it away in my face, that the fact that I didn't actually have anywhere near as much as what she thought left. And she took my wallet and had a look, and there's just kind of a few coins and this shrapnel left. And I just remember her being kind of so disappointed at what had happened. And in my brain, not really understanding it. On one hand, I was kind of too young to do anything wrong. But at the same time, I'd kind of done something that really wasn't acceptable in real life. I just not thought anything about budgeting. I just kind of completely lived for the moment in this fun that I wanted to have playing this machine. And it had all just gone completely in there. And that was the start of it. And then I remember, you know, I'm a huge football fan, a big sports fan. I remember in some of the lessons where we were in school doing GCSEs, we could get away with talking more than I could others. And I was forever being told off for talking at school. Every parent's evening was like, he's a lovely boy, but we just can't shut him up, and he's distracting others. And there was two other guys, Anthony and Carl, that loved their football, and we would talk about who's playing that night. Sometimes we would even bring in like newspaper cuttings from the previous night as to what, if there'd been a really good goal scored or things like that. And I had a scrapbook where I was cutting out pictures of the game, the photos that had been taken in the games previously and that kind of thing. And we just started talking about who we thought would win the match and who wasn't going to win the match. And then we started having like just 50p or £1 on who was going to win the football that night. And then it would get a little bit more complicated. It would be like, well, Man United are more likely to win, so you can have the draw. I'll say Man United, you say whoever else, and you get the draw. And we kind of started to, I suppose, put it into the world of probabilities and odds, and who was more likely to win and what was the more likely outcome, and what was fair to make it kind of an even value of bet. And, you know, that this would just add to my excitement and my anticipation of watching football in the evenings. I would always want to watch the match that was on. I would always watch it with my mum, my dad. And, you know, if it was a neutral of a team that if I was a neutral, it was a game that didn't necessarily support the teams, it would just kind of make it a bit more interesting. I'd feel kind of the excitement sort of bubbling in with me already at that time. And I'm definitely not 16 at this point, because I was the youngest in my school year and we haven't left school. So I'm probably 14 turning 15, or maybe just 15. And I'm thinking in this mode of excitement of what's going to happen, of pairing sport, which I absolutely love to watch anyway, with the excitement of I'm going to have a few extra quid in my pocket that no one's really going to know about, so I can buy some food, I can buy a hot dog, I can buy some ice cream, I can do something that is going to be, I'm not going to have to really ask permission for. It's going to be my money, and I can kind of do what I want with it. And then I remember there was a guy, a good friend of mine, James. He was 6'4", from when we were 14. So he could pass for older than he was. And ironically, his mum worked for Ladbrokes betting shop. So he kind of understood the world of gambling a bit more. And I remember after school one day, he went down and unbelievably was able to go and put a bet on in a bookmaker's for me. How we passed for 18, I'll never know. It was purely on height alone, I should imagine. And I remember he put 50 pence on, I think it was Alan McManus to win the snooker tournament, which was something ridiculous, like 300 or 500 to 1. He was like the least favourite. He was never, ever, ever, ever going to win. But it was the idea that if this wins, I'm going to have £150 or £200 or something. That is going to be unbelievable. That will completely change like my whole existence. That would literally be like winning the lottery, I suppose, in relative terms. And of course he didn't win, but I remember having kind of this slip in my hand and looking at the results on, I think it was probably CFAX or teletext at the time, or trying to find out. And the whole time it just kind of building this excitement in me of what's going to happen and how can I, you know, how amazing is all this. And I then remember having scrunching up the betting slip and putting it in my wallet, and I think my mum eventually finding it and, you know, thinking how on earth has this happened, and, you know, sort of going mad at me. But the deceitful nature of kind of covering my tracks whilst simultaneously being really, really excited about the prospect of winning was just there from such a young age. The kind of I suppose the fear of what's going to happen if this goes bad with the penalty kicks with my dad, but also just this naive wonder of infinite possibilities of, oh my God, look at all this money that I can win. That would be absolutely massive. It was just, would have never seen anything like it. And then as we kind of moved through my teenage years, I was always very tall as well. I'm 6'4" and a bit now, and I hit 6 foot beyond at probably 15 or 16. Start kind of going into pubs and playing fruit machines. Well, by the time I learnt to drive, there was a group of us that would just take the cars out for no reason, almost like a bit of a boy racer meet. And we would go down to Fleet Services to kind of hang out in the evenings to kind of get a McDonald's. But in my mind, that was always first and foremost to play the fruit machines that were there. Because it was a way to go and gamble. By that point, I suppose I was hooked to some degree. I was ready to, you know, always ready to kind of gamble. There wasn't much that would excite me in relation to that. It was always, when it came to recreational downtime with mates, I always wanted it to go through that lens or lead towards that direction. And the fruit machines were a big one for a number of years, up until kind of around about being 18. And then I remember kind of going into, legally being able to go into a bookmaker's, which was probably shortly after turning 18. Might have even dabbled in there before being 18, but I remember kind of being in there probably the week after my 18th birthday thinking, I'm allowed to be in here now. No one can stop me. I'm not committing any offences. I am old enough to make my own decisions, and here I am choosing to be in the bookmakers. And this was at the time that the FOB-T, the fixed odds betting terminal roulette machines, were just coming out as really quite popular. And I mean, that was just kind of like, they call them the crack cocaine of gambling. The fact that you could spin what was up to £100 back then, I think it was almost every 20 seconds, was just absolutely unbelievable. And I remember kind of that came into play almost because I felt like I'd outgrown fruit machines in a bit. I'd had experiences where I'd won back-to-back jackpots and put, I don't know, 5-6 quid in and won 50 odd. So I just wanted to kind of literally raise the stakes to kind of be more, to increase the thrill of the gambling. I remember one day putting 20 pence on in one of these fob-t roulette machines just to kind of see, how does this work then? And I'm a huge Michael Jordan fan, so I went for red 23 as the obvious just guess of a number. And sure enough, it rolls round red 23 and I win £7.20 off of a 20p bet. And gosh, that was it then. This was the new formula. This is how I'm going to make my money. All the gambling fallacies kind of creeping in of, I'm going to win big here. This is great. This is exhilarating. This is thrilling. This is exciting. And I just remember playing the roulette machines almost every chance that I had. I would just go in there. I could use an element of control here and there. I wouldn't lose all my money every day. But I would go into debt really as soon as I hit 18. I remember having a Barclay card with a £1,000 limit that I think I applied for on my 18th birthday. Comes through the post a couple of business days later, and I'd maxed it out. I'd cash withdrew, I think £300 3 times, paid all the fees that were just the most ludicrous way of borrowing money because you just get obnoxious charges, and I just found a way to dwindle it all in the fob-t roulette machines in what was literally no time at all. And then it became very real that I had a problem. Even back then, at the late teen years, I didn't have an element of control. This had all gone out of hand very quickly. This had got to the point where I was not particularly even enjoying gambling at this point. I was being kind of run by a motor to kind of go and do it. And my brain at the time would tell me I was having a great time. It would tell me there was endless possibilities, I could win all this money. But I think even back then, I clicked in very quickly to being a problem gambler who couldn't think about a great deal else, had absolutely zero conscious control over whether or not I was going to bet that day. And then things just kind of escalated. I was working for Barclays Bank from when I was about 18 and a half. And I started going to do a business administration degree at one of the local universities, and I just dropped out because education just wasn't for me at that point. And the idea of having some money in my pocket, I suppose largely the compulsive gambler talking, was just so appealing. And I would get paid at the end of the month from a full-time job. I had to drive from Farnborough to Basingstoke, do 35 hours a week, 5 days a week. And after tax, I would have probably £840 take home. And I had no commitments really. I was living at home paying, £50 a month rent or something like that. My parents were doing all my meals and all my food. And it was all just like disposable income. And I would just go out here and there, hang out with mates, buy clothes, and essentially just dwindle it away. And very quickly I realised that I could get credit. I was living at home where that was kind of propping up my credit score. This was in the early to mid noughties, where they were absolutely just throwing credit at anyone, irrespective of whether or not they were a genuinely good case for it. And yeah, life just kind of became about the thrill of gambling, which is just so depressing really to think back to it. And this is the bit that I've never really told anyone. I was working for Barclays Bank at the time, and I was giving people advice around their finances, about saving money on home insurance or the best returns they could get from a savings account, and I did quite well. I was a good seller. I went out to Monaco. I won a sales trip out there, which, if you've watched my other videos, was just a destructive mission of gambling. But it was a nice gesture from them, and it was so strange that I started to live for the weekend. It wasn't really what I wanted to do with my life. It felt like there was a part of me that was thinking, is this going to be like the next 40 to 50 years of your life? And I really masked it by just staying in the realm of gambling, using gambling as escapism. Whenever the Super Sunday match would finish at 4 o'clock, on a 4 o'clock kickoff on a Sunday, I'd just be like, oh my God, it's, what is it, 5-6 sleeps till the weekend. I can't fathom doing this for like another week. I mean, I loved the people there and I quite liked the job itself, but it just didn't really, match my energy. And so I would just gamble every single lunch break. I would often request an 11 o'clock lunch, while after starting at 9, there was a choice of 11, 12 or 1 o'clock, and people were astounded by the fact I was so keen to go for lunch at 11 o'clock, bearing in mind we were often there till after 5 p.m. And it was just so I could bolt out the door to one of the bookmakers across the road and go and gamble. And yeah, I mean, thinking back now, it was just such a roller coaster. And what was coming on to the part that I hadn't really referenced before was I was working for Barclays, but I had my salary paid into my HSBC account, which wasn't particularly favourable in their eyes, but because I'd had that since I was a youngster, it was kind of going as an active bank account. All my direct debits were coming out from there. And I learnt a bit of a loophole where I could essentially play the bank at their own game, which was, if you had a Barclays staff current account, you could pay a cheque into it to up to £1,000, and then you could withdraw the money against it before the cheque had cleared. And I kind of thought, okay, that's interesting. So I actually ended up having a few Barclays staff current accounts. And what I would essentially do is pay a cheque from HSBC into one of them, withdraw the cash against it, use it, and then pay a cheque into another one of them, do that, take some of that money to cover the first one, and then do it again. So it would essentially kind of fictitiously create about £1,500 out of thin air that would just constantly cycle round, and I wouldn't pay any interest on this money. It would help me out when I didn't have any of my overdraft left, or I'd kind of run out of money from my current account, which was very, very regularly. And yeah, it would massively inflate the turnover on my staff current accounts, which is eventually how I got found out. And I never stole any money, I never took any money that wasn't rightfully mine or committed any illegal acts. But this is one of those ones where it's really quite clever if you think about it, but it's on the cusp of not particularly normal behaviour. You're abusing things that are set up that are designed to be for something else. And that was not looked favourably upon, and I had a bit of a decision to make of essentially, did I want to stay there? They let me resign, and then I kind of essentially moved into the world of fitness, which I've been at ever since, and I now kind of have my own business doing nutrition, personal training, fitness consultations, which is a hell of a lot more thrilling for me. But still, I stand here, next 2 weeks' time will be 9 months without gambling. So even though I really, really enjoy my life, it just goes to show the potency of the cunning, powerful, and baffling addiction is just so staggering. I hope you can hear me, by the way. I know there's some background noise. I do these videos just completely riffed in one take to really try and capture my thoughts in real time. So we'll try and speak up a bit. But yeah, and other points of note as I moved on throughout my, many relapse cycles. I did have one period of 4.5 years without any gambling activity, and that was very, very liberating. That was from about 2009 when I left Barclays. I think the shock of that situation kind of prompted me into building some leverage on being able to abstain, and I eventually relapsed on, I think it was New Year's Day 2013, so there was a long period there. And then in the early 2020s, I got diagnosed with ADHD, and I still don't really know how I feel about the label, in a sense that I don't always feel it's super productive. I feel like it helps me explain a lot of my quirks. I do believe it exists. I do believe that I definitely have it off the charts, and I think that that is responsible for a lot of the frenetic headspace that I can get in, and the science on the kind of the dovetail between ADHD and addiction is very, very potent and very, very clear. And it helped me kind of understand a lot of my you know, the way I'd acted kind of growing up, and how, you know, I could be led by the excitement and the thrill of gambling. And, you know, I've described in the past, it feels like I'm being run by a motor sometimes when I've been gambling, and that is kind of ADHD to a T. But at the same time, I don't think it's kind of hugely productive to label things as, oh, that's my ADHD, I messed up again, I just can't control things. I don't feel that that is the best way to go about life. But it's helped me kind of understand the way my brain works a little bit, and how susceptible I am to things like addiction, you know, thrill seeking, you know, dopamine boosting, albeit cheap dopamine boosting, you know, situations like gambling, like sugar. You know, I'm teetotal, I don't drink or do drugs, but I suppose I'm massively more at risk of those kind of things. And that's been helpful in recovery. It's still got the better of me at times, and I've still relapsed, and I've made other videos about kind of the relapse cycle and where I think that's come from, and some of those stories in the past. But I wanted to do a slightly longer video today to kind of tell a bit about my story. And hopefully, if you are a compulsive gambler, some of this is relatable. Some of this is the kind of content that can help you realize that you're not alone. At the same time, make it quite productive in things that you can do and mindsets that you can adopt to think differently, to help you with your recovery, which is just so important. So thanks so much for taking the time out to watch this video, longer than normal. If you know anyone that's interested in these kind of topics, please put them in the direction of this channel, where I talk about all things gambling addiction, my personal recovery story, tips and tricks of things that have taken me literally, as I said at the start of this video, a quarter of a century to internalize. And because this is a problem that is only getting worse when you look at the trajectory of the statistics, and it is something that I'm so passionate about. And by subscribing the channel or interacting with the videos just really helps me reach more people, so it's much appreciated. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video very soon.